are here with the Phoenix Suns CEO and Diamondbacks CEO, Jerry Colangelo. Jerry, first question. It's Game 7. It's the bottom of the ninth inning. 1 out. Yankees ahead. The wind is stirring. There's a slight rain. I was there. There's a thought in the back of the mind, the Yankees always do this. We're not going to win this game. Was going through your mind, or did you have a different view that somehow this team was going to pull out this victory in Game 7?
I'm going to surprise you. But in order to surprise you, I have to go backwards just a little bit.
Okay.
Before the series began, local media, people from around the country and internationally, were all at Banquet Ballpark before Game 1, interviewing me relative to, how exciting is it? And my comments were basically, it's great to play the Yankees. They are the defending champions. They are the most storied franchise in the history of Major League Baseball. Who better to play? If we're going to win a World Series, that's who you want. So enough said. Next question.
So you had already gotten there. I mean, the fact that you're playing the Yankees, the world champs.
Yeah, but the second question is what really is, I think, the story. And that is, what was my prediction? Immediately I said, I'm not into predicting, but I'll tell you what I'd like. If I had my druthers, we're going to win in Game 7 in the ninth inning with the bases loaded and 2 outs and Gonzo at the plate. So what was going through my mind, to your question in the ninth inning, is I don't believe this. This is really happening. This usually happens to someone else. You've seen it in movies, you've read it in books or on television, but it was actually happening. The only thing I was off on is that there was 1 out rather than 2.
Right.
So that what was going through my mind.
So Womack hits that, hits the ball, ties the game, as I recall. Who came across the plate? Was it Danny Batista? To tie the game?
I believe it was Batista.
Batista ties the game, and then we still have a chance, and Gonzo makes that stride up to the plate.
Well, first of all, Counsell is hit.
That's right.
And now the bases are loaded, and the stage is set with Gonzo, 1 out, bases loaded, tie game.
That's right, coming up to the plate. He swings, and he drops that into to just shallow center field.
Shallow left center, right. And here's what happened.
Okay.
When Gonzo hit the ball, everything slowed down for me. It was in slow motion. The ball seemed to hang in the air. It would never get down. I looked over at Jay Bell at third base and saw him running to home, and he looked like he was running in slow motion. And as I told that story to a few of our players, they said, no, that's how fast he really is. And it looked like it was 2 miles between third base and home plate. And then, of course, when he hit home plate, I was back to real time. It was then a reality. It had happened, and it was an incredible feeling.
Those that have read your book, and this is a great book, we'll get into portions of it, but obviously it does not include winning the World Series and getting a championship ring. That must feel pretty good based on your life experiences and the Phoenix Suns and the struggles that you've had in trying to get that ultimate goal of winning, and now you've achieved that. So does that bring some closure and conclusion?
I'm not sure the word is closure. It brings fulfillment for sure. Something I've been seeking my entire lifetime has been the ring. A disappointment in high school and in college and in the professional ranks, although we've been very close. I've been in the finals on a couple of occasions in the NBA, but this time it happened, and there is a fulfillment for me as a result of that. But I haven't lost any desire to keep going, and it's the old story, you get 1, you want 2. Right. So our goal now is to try and repeat.
We'll get back to baseball in a second, but I think it's on page 26 here. Just want to read this to you. And this could set up your entire philosophy. There are no guarantees in business, just as there are no guarantees in life. Education and experience will teach you how far you can trust your intuition. The trick is to learn to rely on your best instincts, decide, and act without looking back. My question to you, with all the success you've had, how do you develop those instincts? Because you've had pretty good business instincts, super business instincts, but others don't. How do you learn that?
You know, in my case, I can speak from my own, only from my personal experiences. I kind of believe that growing up the way I did, in the type of neighborhood I did, where we didn't have much. So when you start from that kind of a basis, and you get a pretty good foundation in terms of what life is all about putting in a hard day's work for a dollar, and appreciating certain values, family values, and ethics and morality, etc., along with being very competitive as an athlete. I believe because of all of what I just described to you, that's the result. I am who I am because of what I've experienced. But I've always been a risk taker. It didn't matter what that risk might be, not blind risk. I call it calculated risk. Willing to step out on a plank, willing to fail. I truly believe a lot of people aren't willing to do that. They're going to take the easy way, they're going to take the safe way. I'm not saying that's wrong. That's what the difference is between those who are and those who are not. I've never been afraid to fail.
And I think a lot of people may be surprised that you did come from those upbringings. I mean, naturally, when you ask the man on the street, a lot of them would say Jerry Colangelo must have inherited that.
Yeah,
Must have
right.
come from great wealth.
Right.
Genuinely surprised that indeed you have literally built this from your early Chicago days up.
Well, the only home I ever lived in is a home that my grandfather, who was an immigrant from Italy, built out of the remnants of 2 railroad boxcars and some extra lumber. That's in the book. And so I didn't realize we were poor, but because we didn't want for anything. We had food on the table. We didn't compare ourselves to anyone else, and I felt blessed just being in the situation I was in. When we arrived in Arizona in 1968, my wife, 3 children, about 7 or 8 suitcases, and $300 in my pocket, that's literally what we had. And it was starting a new life, new people, new opportunity, and so everything that's happened has happened during this period of time, but it wasn't because someone wrote me a check or that there was an inheritance that got me started. We started with nothing, and I've tried to do the best I can with the talents I've been blessed with, and so be it.
Interesting timing along the way. Dick Klein, your meeting with him creates the opportunity to be in the ground floor of the Chicago Bulls. Tell me a little bit about that opportunity in that time period where literally you bring live bulls in, that becomes the name of the team, and the early Chicago Bulls. You
know, it was so exciting. I was 26 years old. I had some notoriety as an athlete in the Midwest. Dick Klein was an individual in the incentive merchandising business in Chicago. We met. He hired me. 2 weeks later, he told me about his dream to bring pro basketball to Chicago. And so 6 months later, we had a franchise, and he wanted me to be part of that organization.
And you kind of learned an important lesson there, as I recall, because initially it was going to be, what, $750,000, and at the last minute it ends up being
$1,250,000. The last minute, the commissioner, Walter Kennedy, informed us that this is a moving target. And so we had to scramble to come up with the additional support. We got that. And it was a wonderful first year. I learned in the trenches, so to speak, at an early age, not knowing that the NBA was on the verge of massive expansion.
And so massive that, was it 2 seasons later, 1968, the opportunity to come to Phoenix, and I think you describe it in the book, Where's Phoenix, or something to the effect of Phoenix, the middle of the desert?
Yes, the story is basically that we knew 2 franchises were coming in. Milwaukee was going to be one. That was a foregone conclusion. And the other city was up in the air. When I first heard Phoenix, my response was, Phoenix? How could we put a franchise in Phoenix? I had not been to Arizona, so that was unfair when you think back, as I think back on that. And lo and behold, where do I end up? Phoenix, Arizona.
And as the story goes, I think Mother Nature might have played a very, again, one of those unique situations along the way of life where you get out of the plane and there was snow on the ground in Chicago, and Phoenix had a beautiful sunny day.
I tell that story all the time. It was 20 below when I left Chicago. It was 70 degrees when I landed at Terminal 1, which doesn't exist. The palm trees were swinging just a little bit, and it was love at first sight.
So that's 1968. I remember the first Suns game I went to growing up in Arizona. I was 10, which would have been 76, over at Veterans Coliseum. Interesting venue. I mean, it was fun to see professional basketball, but what are your memories of Veterans Coliseum? And obviously, Connie Hawkins and others, there are good memories there, but in time, it became clear that there was going to have to be a new facility.
Well, yes. It was only 1 year old when we started the Phoenix Suns. It was not built for professional sports. It was limited in capacity, didn't have any amenities, didn't really have locker rooms. They had some dressing rooms for some of the other shows, ice shows and the circus, etc. But it served a purpose. It was more than what we needed for a period of time, but eventually we did outgrow it.
1976, I tell, in talking about the fact that I was going to have the opportunity to interview you, and I mean this sincerely. I grew up sort of in the political arena in this state, and in my opinion, there are two people that put Arizona on the map. The first being Barry Goldwater, receiving the Republican nomination for president in 1964, running for president from Arizona. From where? From Arizona. And then, just a short time later, in the next decade, here come the Phoenix Suns to take on the Boston Celtics in the NBA Finals. Phoenix what? Phoenix Suns. Barry Goldwater, Jerry Colangelo, creating the opportunities to put this state on the map. Agree with that assessment?
Well, you know, I never make comments about me. You know, I have great respect for Barry Goldwater and what he stood for as an individual, what the contributions he made to this state and to this country. But to be even mentioned in the same breath with someone like that is humbling from my standpoint. You know, I never dreamed that all these things would happen in my lifetime. I would never have dreamed that I would be thought of by some in that light. I was just out doing a job, doing the best job that I could, but I will say this. From the day I arrived in Arizona, I carried the mantle of wanting to make Phoenix and the state of Arizona known everywhere through what I was doing, whatever it may have been. Even the first All-Star game held at the Coliseum in 1976, when the league didn't control it, but the teams actually put on the event, I went to CBS Sports and asked for time on national TV to promote Phoenix. And so I was able to get that from Bob Wessler, who was running CBS Sports at the time. And what we ended up with was Andy Williams singing "By the Time I Get to Phoenix" and the sun rising over Camelback Mountain. That was the opener to the NBA All-Star game on CBS TV, and I was proud of that. But I wanted the people in Arizona to know we were really selling our city, our community, and our state.
Well, I got to tell you, again, perfectly objective on my part. Huge impact, I believe.
Thank you.
Monumental impact. I'd be remiss, I'm going to check my notes here. My dad is the biggest Phoenix Suns fan around. I wanted to throw a few things at you here, or just play name association. Charles Barkley. Let me just go ahead and quote it, page 136 here. The end of the Barkley story is very simply this. He gave us a tremendous first year, and then he broke my heart. Charles Barkley, what do you think today?
Well, I think that statement kind of sums it up. He was a great talent. He was really a pretty good entertainer. Much of it was very self-serving, and I'm not sure that had he not given us everything when he had the opportunity, we might have won a championship while he was here. But you know, people make their own bed, they sleep in it, and then it's time to go. He asked to leave, and it was time for him to go, because I've come to understand in this business, because I've been in it for 35 years plus, that players come and players go. Coaches come and coaches go. There's not much longevity as it relates to coaching and playing on a professional basis. The human body wasn't built to go on forever. And so You know, you take the most you can from the experiences you have with these individuals, give them a platform and an opportunity to excel as best you can in terms of management and ownership, and that's about as far as you can go. But there will come a time where there will be disappointments, there'll be trades, there'll be injuries. Every situation is a little bit different. Charles was brought here for a reason. We fell short. He wanted out, and we obliged him.
Interesting how quickly, as you look back, in almost a blink of an eye, things change. Because I was one of the, I think it was 250,000 people, 250,000 people down in these streets 10 years ago now in that big parade.
Right.
And I think he was so mobbed, he ended up
Right.
being yanked from the car, and he had to be, the security had to help him get over to this building. And then so close and yet so disappointing, not quite able to finish that, and not been in the running that close since. As far as the basketball perspective goes, how disappointing has it been to have been in the finals twice, still not quite there?
I'd be remiss if I didn't tell the story about the first trip to the finals. I recall standing in Boston on the old hardwood of Boston Gardens. Red Auerbach, the legendary coach of the Celtics, was at one end of the court being interviewed by national TV, and I was too. I was a young guy. We had only completed our 7th season, and here we were in the finals. And standing under the banners, I had this thought, you know, this is really neat. This is our first trip, but boy, we're coming back a lot. And then it took 17 years to come back. That's how difficult it is. That's how competitive it is. And so the second time we made it, in 1993, believe me, I really appreciated it because I had been through a long journey just to get back.
The dry spell.
That's correct. Although there were a couple of teams that we had in the 80s that I truly believe had just as good a chance of winning the championship, and for whatever reason, we fell short. With a little bit of luck, with a little bit more commitment on the part of a few players, I would say to you, we could have won a couple of championships. It didn't happen.
A couple disappointments along the way, a couple more disappointments, kind of the drug scandal in the late 80s. Any comment on that?
Sure. One of my favorite sayings is that, you know, people complain about lack of opportunity. Most often opportunity walks by and they don't recognize it because they're busy complaining. I believe that out of adversity comes opportunity. When you talk about the alleged drug scandal where people were accused, no one was convicted of anything, but damage was done and people were tainted, unfortunately. I supported all of our people because, you know, I believed and still believe people are innocent until proven guilty. None of them were proved guilty. But out of that adversity opened the door for an opportunity, which was to buy the team. And quite honestly, had we not gone through the adversity, had the opportunity not been presented for me to buy the team, we wouldn't be sitting here in America West Arena because America West never would have happened. And chances are there never would have been a baseball team in Banquet Ballpark because it was that transition going from employee to ownership that created the wonderful opportunity to do all the things that transpired after 1987.
Another example of that twist of fate.
That's correct.
One other kind of negative note here, and then we'll be through. Jason Kidd, as you look back on last season and the apparent success that he's having this year on the East Coast, and the Suns' problems this year, around a 500 record. Would it be safe to say that Mr. Colangelo asks very little except that stay out of the newspapers? You know, do the right thing, make good choices, just don't embarrass the team in the newspapers. Would that be a safe statement to make?
I think so. You know, we try to model ourselves. We publicly talk about having a family as an organization, about seeking to have players in our uniforms with high morals. And so it's an embarrassment when things take place in the way of one's personal conduct. And there's some hot buttons when you talk about that, be it drugs, be it abuse. People are tainted, and so is a franchise. And as a result of that, you need to take the appropriate action. you know, as I look at Jason Kidd, we brought him here from Dallas. He made a real contribution. We appreciate that. We have great respect for his talents. But quite honestly, we weren't going anywhere. We had peaked with Jason Kidd. And sometimes the best thing for an athlete is to have a new beginning somewhere else, wipe the slate clean. And so Jason's timing was great for New Jersey. They were catching him on a rebound. He had something to prove. He also joined a team that had acquired a center in Todd McCullough. They also got healthy. There were 2 or 3 key players that were unhealthy when Marbury was back in New Jersey. So the combination of Jason's enthusiasm and skills, a team coming to good health, and some other acquisitions, they're having a terrific year. And quite honestly, I'm happy for Jason Kidd.
Does it surprise you, his ongoing negativity? What seems to be his negativity towards you and the coach? And
it's not the first time. I mean, over the years, I've never, with rare exception, do you have someone leave who doesn't have some negativity? But invariably, with maybe one exception, and that's Barkley, everyone has come around to recognize that it wasn't quite as bad as they thought it was, or what the reasons were for whatever took place. Because we try to be very consistent with how we deal with people. We don't embarrass anyone. We have an expectation level. Individuals are paid a lot of money. We expect them to be good citizens as well as contributing to a winning organization. But life is too short. When you have issues that you can support for a period of time and they become a little bit overwhelming, then it's time to cut cords. People move on and you bring in new ones.
2 other quick questions on basketball. Charles Barkley, back to him. Jersey, will it hang at America West Arena? Will we retire Charles Barkley's jersey at some point?
You know, he's been retired in Philadelphia. He chose Philadelphia to be his team of recognition because he spent his years there. And we've talked about all the players who have come. We have quite an array of former greats who have had their uniforms retired. And quite honestly, it's not on the radar screen.
Okay. Last question. Where do we go? The Suns kind of marred in this 500 season. Prospects for next season, are we already looking ahead, or is there some kind of strategy that you've thought out of how to get the Suns as competitive as the Diamondbacks are in baseball?
Well, you know what's interesting? People have come to have very high expectations of our franchise. And you know, I like that. I mean, it's challenging for me. And I'd like to think we've responded to the challenge. And maybe I'll tell you something you don't know. In the history of the NBA, the Phoenix Suns franchise in little old Phoenix, Arizona, at least that's how people looked at it back in 1968 when I got here, have the 4th best record in the history of the NBA, competing with all the big cities over all time. And we have quite an extensive record of playoff appearances in conference finals and getting to the finals on a couple of occasions. And so when we have a 500 year, boy, the sky is falling. The sky is falling. Everything is relative. You know, in half the cities in the NBA, a 500 team, and they'd be dancing in the streets. And so I think what's important here is, as long as I maintain a passion and a commitment to excellence, I'm not going to stand for mediocrity. I never have. And so if we're mired, which I don't think we are, we certainly are entitled to a down year or down years. But it won't be long, because the commitment and passion will always be there. Once it's gone, it's time for me to leave.
I'd be remiss if I didn't throw this curveball question into you. There are a lot of people that I talk to that say, why doesn't Jerry Colangelo just get it over with? Buy out Bill Bedwell, purchase the Arizona Cardinals, have them build the stadium down the street in downtown Phoenix, and go ahead and make football in this town with the same drive and the same dedication, because a lot of people, rightly or wrongly, perceive the current Cardinals as being content, perhaps, in mediocrity or in that 500 record. Interest in football, would you ever pursue that?
Well, realistically, I don't believe the Bidwells have any interest in selling their franchise. That's their baby. It's a family situation. and they're entitled to do as much with it as they possibly can. You know, we're different people. We're different organizations. We come from different sides of the street, if you will. I have my own methodology. They have their own methodology. I wish them nothing but the best. The basic fact is, one, I couldn't afford to buy them. Number two, they're not for sale. And number three, my plate is pretty darn full as it is. And although I've been married for 41 years to my wife, Joan, if I ever went home and said to her, here's a new one, we're going after a football franchise,
You wouldn't be going home.
I might have a short marriage after that.
There you go.
And I'm being facetious when I say that.
Do you offer any advice? I mean, does he ever seek counsel? Does it, when you look at football across town, and this is just a strictly personal question, but if you happen to be watching football and you see another loss, I mean, your drive, the impression is, and now the facts bear it out, your drive is to win. You want the ring, you want to put together a winning franchise at all costs, whatever it takes. Does it sometimes frustrate you when you look around, and maybe I'm just picking on the Cardinals here, but you don't sense that same urgency or that same zest to give the community a winner?
No. Again, I respect an individual and however they choose to operate. I can only speak for my teams and how I feel about how I conduct my business. I've competed all my life. I've coached in the NBA. I've general managed. I've scouted. I've marketed. I've owned. I've done all those things. So unique in the sense that I've come up through a system and reached the point where I am. And so there's a relationship between players and myself. They know how competitive I am. The relationship I've had with the Diamondback players, which is very unique, is something that I cherish very much because it's all about being in the trenches together, and through times of good and bad. And you know, as long as I'm involved, it'll always be that way.
Any views on the stadium? Any particular view? Will you wade into that controversy and express your thoughts of whether it should be down here on Fillmore Street?
Number one, I've been very sensitive to my involvement with that whole situation, although I have voiced my opinion. My opinion has been very solid. It belongs in downtown Phoenix. If you look at the best return for the investment of any public dollars, it should be where the infrastructure is. The infrastructure is here. It's in downtown. If you put it on the east side or if you put it on the west side, you're actually segregating one part of the valley to the other. Infrastructure is not in either of those places. And so, you know, it may be more beneficial to a franchise to have that stadium where there's a big piece of land. But what's in the best interest of the community in return to the taxpayers would be, where's the infrastructure? And so it may not be as advantageous to a team to have it downtown, but look at where all these buildings are going around the country. They're urban, centered in urban centers. And you look at what's transpired in downtown Phoenix with the arena, with the ballpark, with all of the development, and we've only scratched the surface. I mean, more and more is happening. Downtown Phoenix will be a very hot spot over the next 10 years. So it's just logical, but some people just don't get it. It's become a real political ploy, it seems, and the whole process has had a very left a sour taste with many people because it's turned one part of the valley against another, and that's unfortunate.
Speaking of politics, just a couple names here to bounce off of you. I remember vividly the 1980s, Evan Meekum running for the upteenth time for governor. In 1986, manages to win a very competitive three-way race with, as I recall, Carolyn Warner and Bill Schultz. Gets into office, runs into difficulty, immediately suggests that the Phoenix 40 is somehow behind his ouster and the grand conspiracy. What was the Phoenix 40, and what are your impressions today of that political era in Arizona when the governor of the state was kind of using you as maybe the role model or the spokesperson for this ominous group that was trying to get him out of office?
Well, I wasn't a member of the Phoenix 40 back when Evan Meekum ran and was elected governor. Years later, I was asked to join that group.
So you weren't even in the group?
No, no. But years later, I was asked to not only join, I was asked to chair the group a year after I had become a member. And I had my own opinions about the group. I thought a little bit elitist. I knew the history. I thought when it was formed way back, it really did have the leaders of the community who had a purpose and a role, had some impact on the political process, all for the common good. But then over a period of time, it became a little bit of an elitist group. So when first approached, I showed little interest. But then came to the conclusion, maybe if I were to take a look at it, the best way to affect change is to do it from within. And I did that. A year later, I became chairman and immediately sought to change the way that group had run itself and changed the name from the Phoenix 40 to the Greater Phoenix Leadership, opened up the membership, and tried to consolidate the marketplace. Really brought East Valley and West Side leaders together, tried to do some things that should have been done then and should be done now. But this is a very unique marketplace with diverse interests, and for some reason or other, the legislature is even split in terms of where their support is. It's too parochial in the thinking, because that is not a common, for the common good.
Where does that stand today? Obviously, you took a leadership role once again as far as the business community is concerned. Where does the group stand today, and how much of an impact has it had above and beyond what you've done, particularly to downtown?
I think Greater Phoenix leadership is in transition, and I say that because our marketplace is in transition. We've lost part of our corporate base. We've lost some of our home offices. Financial institutions are being run out of other cities, and we're kind of branches here, have branches in Arizona. So it's been a shrinking corporate base, and therefore the leadership of those businesses that are here are transient. Not many have stayed for very long, so there's a lot of turnover. And as a result, it affects the leadership of various organizations in town. As I sit in my office and I look out at the buildings, very quickly I can think of how many different CEOs have been in that building, and how long or short were their tenure. I've been here a long time. I've been asked to do a lot of things. I've attempted to do more than my share in terms of offering financial resources and time and expertise or opinions on whatever, because I really truly believe that this community has been wonderful for me and my family and my businesses, etc. I also feel, and I've just been this way, I feel passionately about where I am. This is my adopted home. I want this to be a better place after I'm gone than when I first arrived. I want to be part of meeting the needs of the community, because it's important to put back into the community for whatever reasons you think are appropriate. And so the platform that I've been given, and I think it's God-given, it's not because of what I've accomplished in any sense, there's an accountability. There is a responsibility that goes with that. And I want to do that judiciously.
Politicians fear you, or are you, is the political environment such that they come calling, just about all of them come calling? Do you feel that you have a real role in helping create candidacies or support candidacies? And what's your support level down the street at the state capitol and the legislature? And how important is that to you?
Well, I've been asked to be supportive of many politicians from a financial point of view. Just the way the system works, they are always looking for financial support. And I'll tell you where I've changed, and changed in a big way. I think it's important to have strong leadership coming from our political side. And I'm more interested today in what I think is appropriate than one's personal agenda when running for the state legislature. And so when people come with their hands out looking for financial support, I get very specific, wanting to know what their position is on various issues that are important to me, that I believe in. And I do have some kind of history as it relates to working on a lot of these issues, whatever it may be. Might be the homeless issue. It might be dealing with diversity, by way of example. How are we meeting the needs in the valley today? Where are we going to be 5 years from now, 10, 15 years from now? Well, you know, some political types can give me a responsive answer and some can't. And I really am not wasting time or money on those that don't show that they have the same kind of a commitment in meeting the needs of our people.
Well, in meeting the needs of the people, let's talk a little bit about that and what the Phoenix Suns provide the community and now the Arizona Diamondbacks charities.
Mm-hmm.
You really are helping this community financially. I would imagine just having your name on a board, for instance, would be of help, and you're being solicited for that type of involvement all the time. But the financial end of it, what are we providing? How do you look at that, both from the Suns and the Diamondbacks perspective? How important of the role has that become in Phoenix?
Well, corporately, those organizations contribute on an annual basis millions of dollars back into the community to meet needs in the community. We do that through charities. We do that through fundraising activities. Our people who are employed by these organizations spend hours and time on their own representing us in the community with various organizations, et cetera. On a personal basis, I guess if I ever leave the world of sports, I could become one of the top fundraisers, because I do that anyway. When there are needs to be met and people are having difficulty, if I'm in a position to be of help personally or corporately, it's what I believe we should do, what I should do. And if I believe in a cause, I'll put myself out there and do whatever I can. And so on an annual basis, I'm raising millions of dollars a year, hopefully for the right organizations and the right causes. And none of it is self-serving. I mean, it's not the kind of thing that I guess I should say is rewarding in one sense. When you see good people have an opportunity to do good things and you can be supportive and it touches the hearts and lives of a lot of people, that's fulfilling also.
I want to move now quickly. I know your time is short with us today, but into my favorite topic. You don't know how big of a fan, Diamondbacks fan, and not being a sports guy, but an anchor. When I wear my jerseys during the playoffs of the World Series on the air.
I like that.
Yeah. GM's not overly happy from time to time, but I remember vividly, like yesterday, 1994. I was at some function here in Phoenix, and I've known Jim Bruner a long time. And Bruner was preparing a run for Congress.
Right.
And the issue of baseball had come up, and the decision to pursue that vote on the Board of Supervisors. And he was there was quite a bit of pressure, vote no and save your congressional career, vote yes for the future of baseball in Arizona. Jim Bruner ended up voting yes, being the third vote, as I recall, on the Board of Supervisors. My last question about politicians, and we'll leave it with him specifically, how big of a role, politically speaking, do you think that he had? Is he sort of, as far as baseball concerned, is he sort of the shining politician that stood for something and now is, at least politically, the mechanics of politics and getting Bank One ballpark built? Is he really the hero in all this?
Well, the way I would describe it is as follows. Jim Bruner was one of two people who came to see me and tried to convince me that I should pursue a baseball franchise because of his personal interest and love for the game. And he truly believed the time had come for Major League Baseball to arrive in Arizona. This happened 2 weeks after the Suns were eliminated by the Chicago Bulls in the 1993 NBA Finals. And it happened right here in this office where we're sitting. And Joe Garagiola Jr. was the other individual who joined Jim. So Jim really had no choice but to do exactly what he did. In making the choice he did to vote for it, what else could he do?
Right.
He was the one who came to me to say, I want this to happen. I would support it. You're the guy, Jerry, who has the credibility to make it happen. So I don't really believe he had any other option. He may have really wrestled with this in a big way, and I understand that. But here, ultimately, he showed his colors. He showed leadership by standing behind a commitment. The commitment was he believed in it. How could he turn his back on it for personal gain? And we were hopeful that it wouldn't cost him a political career. But I will tell you, historically, if you look around the country and you look at some of the great things that have happened in various cities and various states, there have been numerous casualties. Great things have happened and casualties have taken place in those respective situations because people were willing to step out on that plank.
A little bit of some dark days. I mean, were you surprised with the negative a backwash that kind of occurred? You had the Sun City groups, you had the senior citizen groups. All of a sudden, we had quite a few anti-tax groups. Were you surprised at the ferocious nature of being opposed to the building of the stadium?
Yes, I was, and it was also disappointing. But enough time has transpired, in my opinion, where, as you read in my book a few minutes ago, you don't look back on those situations, you look forward. If those individuals haven't been tempered by what has transpired in the way of downtown Phoenix and financial economic impact of this franchise the Diamondbacks have had in this city and state, then they just don't get it. And the emotional fulfillment that took place for an entire state, not only for this generation of people, but for future generations, is absolutely incredible. And I don't know how you calculate that kind of value. And again, if they don't see it, they just don't get it.
They just don't get it. I think that immediately when you decided to go the baseball route, you kind of made a decision that pitching was key. That with pitching, competitive pitching, you could be competitive and go for the World Series right away. And that's exactly what happened. Did you ever dream that you could put it together within 4 seasons?
No, because the plan changed. We looked at Colorado and their experience with the Rockies, saw that a city had been awarded a franchise. They had a 4 or 5 year honeymoon as they were building their team. And we were very similar to Colorado in terms of market size and economics, et cetera. And so when we built the ballpark and we got into our first season, we wanted to sign a couple of players with credibility, Jay Bell, Matt Williams. We're going to start slowly, build a team over 4 or 5 years. And we had great response that initial season. We drew 3.6 million. We had 36,000 season tickets. And we actually operated from operations before debt service, et cetera, at a profit. And then proceeded to find out we lost 25% of our season tickets when we sent out our renewal, which caused me to change our plan. When I decided to do that, I had to embark on a 4-year plan. And that's when I decided, pitching, we have to be competitive now, we have to protect the investment, and we now have concluded 3 of those 4 years of that plan. What do we have to show for it? 2 division titles, the first team, the quickest turnaround in the history of baseball, which has great history, from year 1 to year 2 when we won 100 games and won the division title. We won a 2nd division title and a World Series. So I would say aesthetically, as it relates to a plan, that plan's worked pretty darn well. Now financially, it's been anything but that. Was there a little misread regarding support for the franchise? The answer is yes. I did expect more support than we've received. I'm not complaining about the support we've received. How can a baseball team who draws 2.5 million, 2.7 million, 3 million people be disappointed? That's not the point. The point is we really had to draw 3.5 million people to make it work, and that's where we fell short. I do think, on a very positive note, that the great experience of winning this past year, a World Series, there's been great carryover. We've already sold an additional 3,000 season tickets that may eventually cap out at 5,000 season tickets. We expect to sell a lot of individual tickets. The exhibition games down in Tucson are 40 to 50% up in advance sales. So I really do think we're going to have a turnaround year. We're going to have a real upswing in terms of attendance.
I mean,
Yes.
if the World Series doesn't begin to swing the financial
Right.
picture, I mean, what will?
Right.
And you don't want to be in a situation, obviously, of the famous case of the Florida Marlins, well, where a new owner has that team win the World Series and then looks at and this is how the story goes, but apparently looks at the bottom line and says, let's have a firestorm or a fire sale here because I can't afford to compete next season. I mean, it'd be tragedy to think that that's the finances of any organized sport, and yet it seems to be that the more successful you are, sometimes the bigger struggle you have financially.
Well, you know, that's just a reality of being in this business. In baseball, there's an economic system that doesn't work. There aren't any caps, there aren't any restraints. Though he with the biggest pocketbook can sign the best players. And so that's what makes last year such a memorable accomplishment for so many. And that is, we had the 9th highest payroll in baseball last year. We competed against the very best. We came out on top. You know, the Marlins situation is they had a one-year plan. They went out and signed a few people, they got a few breaks, they won a World Series, and immediately unloaded. We embarked on a 4-year plan after our first season. We've concluded 3 of those years. We have 1 more year of that 4-year run. I've never touched that plan. I said we were going to give it our best. So far, so good. And we think we're in a position this year to have an outstanding season if we can stay healthy. We've added some additions to our pitching staff, and as you said earlier, and correctly so, you know, pitching is where it is, pitching and defense. And so we're excited about a very positive year that appears to be on the horizon.
The following year, 2003, is it safe to say dark clouds are on the rise? I mean, baseball as we know it could really change. Revenue sharing, players' salary cap, the union doesn't seem at all interested in that. This season we're going to play, the next season if we don't have some major changes. I mean, how real is that's looming, and that could end the baseball that we know?
Well, I'm not one to predict doom and gloom, but what I would say, and the reality is that we have 1 year left to get our act together. It'll be a difficult year in negotiations. I would hope that the union can recognize what truly the state of affairs is in baseball. And to protect that system, there needs to be more of a partnership between the players and owners so that you can develop a model, and there are plenty of models to look at, the NFL and the NBA in particular, who have an economic structure that is fair, that allows small market teams to compete with big market teams. It relates to revenue sharing, it relates to caps and restraints in terms of spending. In that kind of a system, baseball would have a glorious future. Short of that, it'll be a struggle. And so, I guess,
budge in that?
well, the union in baseball is the strongest union of all professional sports. Again, I'm not going to predict doom and gloom. I would like to think that the eyes will be open and we'll have a happy ending.
And you could play a pivotal role in that. I mean, as times get tough and as we get into crunch time here, because of the relationship that you do have and the reputation you do have with your own players, I mean, you could be one of the owners that's kind of brought to the forefront to try to reason with the union and try to get some of these changes done.
Well, I've played, I would say, a significant role in the NBA on that very subject. I've been in the league a long time. There's been a respect on the part of the union and the players for my role, again, appreciating the various jobs that I've had and how I feel about the league, and I have the second longest tenure in the history of the league. So in basketball, very, very involved. The way we're structured in baseball, it's kind of a closed group that has been without owners involved who are really doing the negotiating. I've offered my services. It's up to the commissioner. You know, I'd be willing to do anything possible to try and resolve the situation.
In the wake of 9/11, we saw the country basically begin to heal through baseball. I mean, there was no greater moment than when we heard play ball.
Mhm.
The country started to get back to going again. And yet the flip side of that is what kind of ramifications are there if the owners and players don't recognize how important it is and there's another shutdown? I mean, that can't happen again, can it?
There are many people who feel a shutdown could be a disaster for baseball. I think baseball must challenge itself. They must change the way baseball conducts its business. And so when they I'm referring to, of course, are the players and the owners. It's a collective situation. It needs to be collectively bargained. But there must be a realization that the bright future can only come with changing the system.
One other thing, I did want to mention David Wells. Let me find the quote here. Obviously not in exact reference to Wells, but along the same line. Because this is a recent situation, and I, being one of your biggest fans and the franchise's biggest fans, felt a little burnt too. I will acknowledge that I probably place more importance on the character of an individual than any owner, and maybe most people in sports. Another part of my motivation is that I've been burned a few times in this business by athletes I trusted. David Wells comes to town. We're looking for a third starting pitcher in a big rotation. Apparently a verbal agreement is reached and gets back to New York, and Mr. Steinbrenner offers something else. How do you take that? How do you react to that?
There's no question that we shook hands on the deal. His agent was there. Joe Garagiola, the GM of the D-backs, was there. 1:30 in the morning, we shook hands. He was a Diamondback. He was going home, due back right after Christmas to take his physical, and deal is done. Everything was agreed to. He went back to Florida. George Steinbrenner, who basically lives in Tampa, called Wells, got together with him, asked him if he had signed anything. He said, no, but I shook hands on a deal and have a deal. And he says, well, let me tell you what I'm going to do. So he encouraged the player, enticed the player to break a commitment, and offered him a lot more money, and Wells accepted it. And basically said, well, I never signed anything. And, you know, people always go back on the word. I know it may be hard for me to live it down, but I have to do what's in my best interest. Well, you know, my attitude there is it's a sad commentary when an owner encourages a player to break a commitment, break a deal, break a verbal deal. And number two, it's a sad commentary when an individual makes a statement that Wells does about his own character. And bottom line is, they have to live with it.
Was that also maybe a jab at what's developing here between the former world champion Yankees and the reigning champion Diamondbacks? I mean, is that Steinbrenner's way of throwing down a gauntlet, saying, I'll do whatever it takes to make sure I get
you know, I can't speak for George Steinbrenner. You know, the one thing I would tell you I respect, and I can't say there's much I respect, I do respect that he's a competitor. I only ask that you play with the same rules and play above board. If it's only about who has the most money, and you're a competitor, and you're willing to stoop to any level to win, that is inappropriate. That's someplace I won't go. I just won't get there. And so we'll do the best we can with the resources we have and compete against whomever we are asked to compete against and hope for the best. And that's why last year was such an enjoyable, fulfilling experience for us because we've held to our guns in terms of how we conduct our own business.
How involved are you day to day? I mean, Joe Garagiola Jr., if he works up a deal for a pretty good pitcher and it involves Durazo and DeLucci and maybe one or two others, does that come to you and you say, oh, okay, we're going to execute that, or is that done by somebody else that you kind of trust to make those decisions?
No, there's contact on the player side, on the coaching side. You know, I'm involved on a day-to-day basis from top to bottom. I have people in both organizations who report to me. Brian, my son, who I have great respect for, Rich Dozer, over with the Diamondbacks on the same basis. Joe Garagiola, we probably speak 3 or 4 times a day. And so it's not a matter of something happening without my knowledge. It's being a part of all the discussion and consideration before a deal is even done, let alone concluding the deal. So, you know, that's a part of the business I like. I've been doing that all my life. I've been negotiating deals all my life. And as you've probably noted, for all of the high-profile players and big contracts, I'm very much involved.
For the viewers, last baseball question, for the viewers in the desert Southwest here in Yuma and Southern California that we reach, the message to them, if they've not had an opportunity to experience Bank One Ballpark or America West Arena, but keeping it on baseball and the World Series champion Diamondbacks, what message do you send the folks of Yuma and Southern California who are primarily Padres fans, unfortunately? How do we win them over this coming season?
Well, you know, we feel we've done the best we can in putting out a product. We're proud of the people wearing our uniforms. We think we have a wonderful facility. It's one of the finest ballparks in the country today. So it's a great opportunity with reasonable pricing to enjoy America's pastime. And we would love to have people from beyond the state of Arizona, throughout the Southwest, to come in and enjoy the great venues we have here, not just Bank One Ballpark, but America West Arena, and to just enjoy the experience. Those of us who grew up on following baseball teams and later football teams and then basketball teams and all of them, that's a real joy to have grown up with teams and knowing the players and statistics, et cetera, and take some joy in associating with winning. You know, there's a lot of psychology involved in why teams who win have great followings and why teams who lose don't, because people want to associate with winners. And we'll continue to do our best to win and represent the city and the state and the Southwest in this sense. And if people wish to partake, we extend a welcome, an invitation to all of them.
Jerry Colangelo's heart more in baseball now than basketball, or is it possible to love both sports equally, even though the beginning was basketball?
I think it's a heart that's full of both. There are highs, there are lows. The highs are never as high as the lows are low. There's one day when I may lean one way or the other, but when I go to sleep at night, there's a couple of loves there, and I'm not going to rank one ahead of the other.